How did a single law in 1609 turn metal into the world's most credible money, and what shattered that trust forever? The answer lies in the story of a bank, a nation, and a promise that changed everything. In Amsterdam, the promise of the guilder began not with gold or silver, but with law. The city's magistrates, wary of the chaos that plagued other European mints, drafted a charter for their new bank in 1609. At its heart stood a single, unwavering rule. The Bank of Amsterdam would not lend. No merchant, no prince, no city official could borrow from its vaults. The ordinance was clear. Every coin deposited must remain untouched, every guilder accounted for. The text reads, "The Whistle Bank shall not grant any sort of credits, but simply hold the deposited coin in its vaults." This was radical in an age where temptation often led rulers to raid reserves or dilute the weight of coins. Here, only lawful money, full-weight silver and gold, could enter the bank. Debased coins and raw bullion were sent to the mint, measured, and converted into standardized Dutch currency. The bank's standards were strict. Each guilder had to meet the city's exacting assay, with purity and weight certified before acceptance. If a coin failed, it was refused. The rule was simple: honest money only. The magistrates put their signatures to these rules, binding themselves and every successor. In the ledgers, every deposit was matched by an equal reserve, locked away from speculation or political need. This discipline was more than policy. It was a covenant. The founders understood that trust in money begins with trust in law. Without it, even the purest silver becomes suspect. By barring all lending and enforcing purity, the Bank of Amsterdam set a new standard for honesty in finance. Merchants could read the ordinance for themselves, see the assay marks stamped on each coin, and know that their wealth was safe from hidden risks. In the city's vaults, money was not a promise, it was a fact. And from that fact, a fragile but enduring trust began to grow. Each morning, as the city stirred to life, the Bank of Amsterdam's doors opened on a ritual that would shape the fate of nations. Inside, beneath thick beams in the hush of expectation, clerks gathered at long wooden tables. Ledgers, bound in leather, pages crisp and ruled, waited for the day's entries. Every deposit began with a careful count. Silver coins, weighed and tested, were poured onto the scales. An assayer checked each piece against the city's standard, noting the purity and weight on a certificate. Only then did the coins pass into the vault, where they would rest, untouched, until claimed. The process did not end with metal. A cashier appointed by the city sat with pen in hand. He entered the amount, the name, and the date into the ledger. Each figure demanded precision. No rounding, no haste. When the entry was complete, he signed his name beneath the sum. A second cashier, acting as witness, added his own signature. No coin moved, no account changed, without this dual mark of approval. It was a small act, repeated thousands of times, but it was the foundation of trust. The first recorded gyro, an early transfer, moved value from one merchant to another without a single coin leaving the vault. Instead, a page in the ledger changed. A subtraction here, an addition there. The bank issued a receipt, stamped and signed, which could be redeemed or traded. These receipts became as good as coin, accepted by merchants across continents. The paper did not tarnish or wear thin. Its value lay in the discipline behind it. For decades, the ledgers told a story of restraint. Every entry, every signature, was a promise kept. Across the world's oceans, Dutch guilders changed hands with a quiet certainty. In Batavia, a merchant could settle an entire cargo of spices with a slip of paper from Amsterdam. In Boston, traders trusted the same currency for barrels of sugar and chests of tea. Ships arrived in distant ports bearing not just goods, but receipts stamped with the city's seal, proof that value was waiting, unchanged, in the vaults of the Whistle Bank. Invoices from the Dutch East India Company show guilders used to pay for silk in Asia, silver in the Americas, and timber in Scandinavia. The ledgers tell of millions of coins, each one weighed, assayed, and stamped with the words, "God be with us," moving from the hands of sailors to the tables of bankers, then out again across the globe. By the middle of the 17th century, half of Europe's oceanic trade was routed through Dutch hands. The guilder's purity and the discipline behind its issuance meant that a piece of silver minted in Amsterdam could be as trusted in Batavia as it was in the city's own markets. Merchants wrote home, "He who holds the guilder holds the world's trust." The guilder was more than currency. It was a contract, unspoken but understood, between strangers separated by continents and seas. It was the promise that a coin's worth would not be lost to fraud or fortune. In every port, every ledger, and every deal, the guilder carried the weight of a nation's word. And for generations, that was enough. Silver poured into Amsterdam's vaults was not left idle. Ledgers from the city's financial committees show the sums. Tens of thousands of guilders allocated each year to provision fleets, deepen canals, and build the infrastructure that would carry Dutch ambition across the globe. The captured silver from distant mines, marked with assayer stamps from Potosi and Zacatecas, was tallied, converted, and assigned to accounts earmarked for new ships or repairs. The city's magistrates reviewed these numbers with care, balancing risk and reward with the precision of merchants. In 1628, when Piet Hein's fleet brought home Spanish treasure, the city's books recorded a sudden surge. That windfall alone funded the construction of dozens of East Indiamen, ships that would set sail for Batavia, laden with goods and hope. Canal budgets tell a similar story. The deepening of the IJ waterway, the expansion of the Amstel's locks, and the maintenance of the city's iconic bridges, all were paid in guilders, each expense recorded in the council's minutes. Committee members debated the merits of each project, their signatures anchoring every outlay to the discipline of the bank. There was no borrowing against future gains. Each guilder spent had already been earned, weighed, and accounted for. The city's prosperity grew not from speculation, but from the careful multiplication of honest money. Yet beneath the surface, the scale of these investments hinted at a new kind of risk. As the fleets grew larger and the canals deeper, the demands on Amsterdam's treasury multiplied. The guilder became not just a store of value, but a lever, amplifying the city's reach, while quietly increasing the strain on its reserves. Across the North Sea, England was gathering strength. Its new industries churned out goods at a pace the Dutch could not match, and its navy pressed Dutch trade routes with growing confidence. To the south, France's ambitions expanded under the weight of royal armies and restless revolution. Each year, the Dutch treasury faced fresh demands, defending distant colonies, paying for convoys, funding allies. War expenditure charts from the late 18th century show a relentless climb. What once was a manageable outlay for ships and soldiers now threatened to overwhelm the Republic's resources. Inside the Bank of Amsterdam, the ledgers began to reflect this mounting strain. Withdrawals rose as the government and the Dutch East India Company reached for reserves to cover shortfalls. Silver that had once lain undisturbed for decades was now called upon to fill the gaps left by lost ships and shrinking tax receipts. The city's financiers, men who had once prided themselves on restraint, gathered behind closed doors to debate a dangerous proposition. Should the bank, forbidden by charter from lending, quietly support the state? The answer was recorded in the margins of secret loan entries. Clandestine advances flowed from the vaults to the treasury, each one a breach of the bank's founding promise. Directors signed their names to these decisions, aware that each signature weakened the covenant that had built a world's trust. The discipline that had set Amsterdam apart began to erode, replaced by a quiet moral compromise. The guilder, still pure in the eyes of foreign merchants, now carried a hidden burden, a debt that could not be seen but would soon be felt by all. In the winter of 1795, French troops marched into Amsterdam and demanded the truth the world had long taken for granted. Auditors, summoned by the new authorities, descended into the stone vaults beneath the Whistle Bank. They carried with them the ledgers, the signatures, and the weight of 4 generations' trust. What they found was not silver, but silence. Each chest was opened, each coin counted. The numbers told a story no one wanted to believe. The inventory sheets, now preserved in the National Archive, recorded the final reckoning. Of the 16.2 million guilders owed to depositors, only 2 million remained in precious metal. Nearly 90% of the world's most trusted currency had vanished, replaced by city bonds and broken promises. For every 10 guilders on the books, only one could be paid in coin. The rest was gone, lent away, lost to war, or locked in the paper of a bankrupt republic. The news spread quickly. Merchants who had built fortunes on the reliability of a signature now faced ruin. In the exchanges and counting houses, panic rippled through the city. The bank's insolvency was not just a loss of wealth, but a collapse of faith itself. Auditors, once anonymous clerks, became reluctant heralds of disaster. Their signatures on the inventory sheets closed an era. The covenant that had made Amsterdam the heart of global trade was broken, not by invasion, but by the slow corrosion of honesty within its own walls. In the autumn of 1816, a new statute restored the guilder as the heartbeat of Dutch life. The French franc, a reminder of occupation, was swept away by the Coinage Act passed on September 28th. The guilder returned not as a symbol of empire, but as the foundation for rebuilding a battered nation. Mint records from Utrecht and Haarlem show the first coins struck to exacting standards: 10 grams of silver, stamped with the words, God, ze, met ons. The new law called in every foreign coin, melting the confusion of past years into a single, trusted currency. Engineers and financiers turned to the guilder to shape the future. Budgets for the North Holland Canal, opened in 1824, and the first railway from Amsterdam to Haarlem, completed in 1839, were paid in guilders. Each project carefully funded, every expense recorded in ledgers. The decimal system, introduced by the Act, made calculations simple and honest, easing trade and investment. Factory owners paid wages in guilders. Shopkeepers tallied receipts in neat columns of cents. Through the quiet rhythm of daily exchange, the guilder financed not just recovery, but renewal. In the hands of workers, merchants, and builders, it became a tool for progress, steady, reliable, and real. In the shadow of hardship, the guilder became more than a measure of value. Through the long years of the Great Depression, its worth held steady while banks in other countries faltered. Price lists from the 1930s show bread and potatoes still sold for familiar sums, and shopkeepers counted on the guilder's constancy as the world around them grew uncertain. Resilience. In the war that followed, the coin took on a new meaning: defiance. When German soldiers occupied the Netherlands in 1940, Dutch families hid guilders under floorboards, behind loose bricks, and beneath garden soil. They refused to surrender their savings to the occupier's Reichsmark. A diary from the NYOD archives records a daughter's words: "Father hid the guilders under the kitchen floor. We traded for potatoes and refused the German coins." Each hidden coin became a quiet act of defiance, a promise that the old country would return. In these small acts, the guilder became a symbol of hope and resistance. Even as the world's currencies shifted and trust was tested, the Dutch held on to their coins, not just for their metal, but for what they meant. Through occupation and deprivation, the guilder endured as a heartbeat of dignity and quiet rebellion. After the war, the guilder no longer drew its strength from silver or gold, but from the promise of stability. In December 1946, the Netherlands fixed the guilder at 2.6525 to the United States dollar. This new anchor, set by international agreement, meant that the value of Dutch money rested not in vaults, but in reputation. For decades, that trust held. The guilder became a quiet measure of post-war recovery, a steady pulse behind every paycheck and every shop window. But the world changed again. In the late 20th century, dreams of a united Europe gathered force. The guilder, once the pride of a nation, would soon be replaced by the euro. On January 1st, 2002, people queued at banks across the Netherlands, clutching notes and coins that had shaped lifetimes. Some smiled at the promise of a new beginning. Others hesitated, feeling the weight of farewell. An elderly shopkeeper said softly, "The euro may be stronger, but the guilder was honest. You could hold it, feel it, and know it was real." And so, a sound that had echoed for centuries faded into memory. Today, as digital money erases borders and identities, the story of the Dutch guilder warns us, when trust fades, even the most stable currency can vanish overnight. In a world where trillions change hands with a keystroke, the real currency remains faith. In institutions, in promises, in each other. That lesson endures long after the last guilder fell silent.